Hello and welcome back to the Johnson Fitness and Wellness Podcast. Today I am very privileged to be joined by the winner of Best Project by Home and Gardens, the winner of Best Residential Interior Designer of the Year by UK Enterprise, and the winner of Best Residential Interior Design Practice 2025 by Lux Life, Augustine from Studio Augustine. Say hello, Augustine.
Hi everyone. Hi Jay.
I caught you off guard with that one, didn't I? You didn't think I was going to reel them off.
Yeah.
Got to give you your flowers when
I
you
was like,
deserve them.
"Oh."
Absolutely. Right. Could we start off by kind of you just giving us a bit of your background, telling everyone who you are, what you do, and kind of how you do it?
Okay, yeah. I'm Augustine Atobatele, Creative Director of Studio Augustine. We specialize in residential and commercial spaces. So we work in the UK and globally. So at the moment, we're working in the Caribbean, around Europe, in the US, in Africa, not Asia just yet. And so that's a combination of sort of both sort of apartments, pied-à-terres, to townhouses, to mansions, beachfront properties, hotels, and restaurants.
There we go. You're a man of many talents, and you're all over the globe doing many different things. Okay, perfect. So obviously this is a podcast kind of centered around the home gym. I understand obviously you've done quite a few in your time. So let's start off with, how have you kind of seen the concept of a home gym kind of evolve in the last few years? So when you first kind of started doing them to now, how have you seen it change and evolve?
Yeah, so I think when I first sort of started working in sort of designing home gyms, I think the initial thing was always just an additional sort of thing to have, like, the luxury thing to have. I think sort of after COVID, there's been a shift, I think, into how people care very much about their personal health.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think just after COVID, I think one of the things is that it seems as though there's less time as such. So I guess the convenience of sort of having the home gym now, it's more about the functionality as well as sort of the aesthetic of it. Whereas I felt sort of previously it was more of an aesthetical sort of addition thing to almost to have in some way. And so now we think a lot more sort of about the functionality of the gym and what exercises is possible sort of to do within the space, and thinking about how to maximize that space, that they can basically achieve the best sort of result in enhancing their health.
Amazing. So going on to the design, being what you're very good at, what's your philosophy when it comes to designing a fitness or wellness space in the home?
So I think when it comes to sort of the design sort of philosophy, when it comes to design, a home gym in essence, is I think it's sort of centered around sort of functionality is always like the first sort of most important thing. Then I feel like the aesthetic kind of flows along with it. Now, I think we still apply the same somewhat principle as when we're designing a home or a hotel or a restaurant, and which is that it should be emotive. It should have some kind of emotional resonance and gravitas when you design a space. And I feel like when you're able to sort of create things and you take that those sort of foundations, that allows you to be able to sort of build around in what and ultimately just a space that someone's going to use. I mean, it can look very beautiful, but I think if it doesn't have that resonance and that gravitas with it, people would not use it. So it's important to completely sort of understand what the client sort of requirements are when coming to the sort of designs, like what exercises they do they work with a trainer, and if they do work with a trainer, what exercises does that sort of trainer do, what kind of functional exercises, is it sort of more resistance, do they more into cardio? And so I think those aspects of understanding that, I think then that starts to build like a layer cake in a way, as designing it.
So you mentioned functionality. So when someone says to you, I'm thinking of putting a home gym in, I've got this specific space, do you approach it with more functionality in mind, or do you approach it with kind of including it as part of the lifestyle?
I think it has to be a combination in terms of when it comes to sort of designing it. So I think we think about functionality as well as sort of marrying it sort of together. Because I feel like, it's one thing that, a client can just simply say, oh yeah, I'm going to have a gym and I'm just going to put a whole bunch of equipment in. But somewhat of why you sort of come to a designer is that you want it to equally sort of look beautiful. It's an extension of the home or the hotel or, whatever sort of the space is. So I think we think about like, what they do. And also I think one key thing is, think about people's sort of circadian rhythms. So are they someone who, like for myself, I work out at 6 a.m. in the morning. Some people prefer to kind of work out in the evenings. So thinking about, okay, what time do they, so what's the kind of the preference to, sort of work out? And I think just thinking that sort of aspect, again, kind of all listening to what the practice of how they approach it and then marrying it together. So I think they go hand in hand. I don't think it's really possible to separate both of them because, I think, and what's one of the beautiful things now these days is that a lot of sort of company allow you to sort of customize sort of gym equipment. So that way you don't have this thing where, okay, now you go into the gym and it's just like, rubber floor.
Yeah, of course.
Ugly equipment. I think it all kind of fits in together to make it sort of more enjoyable space. So we always kind of think of, okay, these are the sort of equipment, a bit sort of like, like we do with a home, is sort of zoning sort of spaces, what is sort of required, and think, okay, what sort of are the best things that we can sort of utilize, whether it's off the shelf or whether we have to sort of do some bespoke items.
Amazing. So you kind of answered my next question slightly, but I'm going to ask it because I think I'll get a slightly different answer in the sense of what are the first like 3 things that you consider when designing a space for someone in their home with a gym?
So I think, again, the first thing would be sort of with a home gym would be, what sort of are the exercises the client would do, or what, what's, I think, as over time, when you're in your sort of 30s, you could do sort of about, I think it's like sort of, you could do 50-50 cardio and 50 sort of resistant. As we sort of mature, is that then it should actually be more resistant and sort of less of cardio. So depending on what the age of that sort of person is or people, we think about, okay, in the next sort of 10-20 years or so, if they're going to sort of be in this sort of property, they're probably going to do perhaps sort of more resistant sort of exercises. And they're kind of thinking about, okay, if that's going to be more resistant, then it means sort of more weight. Are we sort of going to do sort of free weight and thinking of how much sort of space is it we have? What sort of cardio equipment, for example, that has a multifunctionality can we include as well in the space? And then I think there's just the overall space of getting it to all look cohesive together.
Okay, so for people short on space, what are some of the kind of creative and smart ideas that you come up with to kind of counteract that for people?
So I think particularly when people are short on space, one of the things to think about again is machines or equipment that have sort of multifunctionality. What's some of my favorites is the sort of Kinesis by Techno Gym. I love that because I think you can do sort of various exercises with it. Now, if, for example, the budget wasn't, to that extent and the space was even a lot sort of smaller, we often sort of tend to look at things like sort of dumbbells and kettlebells sort of within the space. And I think just allowing, where you have sort of hooks to allow to, to be able to do suspension sort of exercises to kind of focus on different sort of muscle groups within the body. And I think with those equipment, they don't sort of take as much space. And I think then that there's a heavy aspect of it that is about sort of functionality, because if it's not sort of the biggest of space, I think things should also be feasible to the eyes and be very beautiful as well.
Amazing. So you mentioned it earlier on. You mentioned the word zoning. How important is zoning? So how important is it for someone to have a specific cardio space, a specific weight space, how important is that? Or do you find it more important to just kind of all mix it into one and blend it all together?
I think it's important. So in general, I think sort of the way exercise works and to make it quite easy, for someone at the home to be able to sort of work out, usually you always sort of start with a warm up. And whether that warm up is, running a treadmill or, whatever, some kind of cardio of some extent or on a mat, then, you usually sort of go up towards your resistance and then potentially you might sort of finish back again sort of with the cardio. And I think one of the things is that if it was having to go back and forth, that in itself is quite sort of exhausting. So I think we often kind of think about, okay, again, these are kind of the exciting zone, sort of the areas So if someone just said, you know what, I just want to run, or, you know, if it's a couple, you might have one half is not interested in doing resistance and just wants to sort of do cardio, and the other one wants to do, like, you know, resistance, but they want to ultimately spend time together but not be on top of each other.
Absolutely.
It's important, I think, just to sort of separate that space, that one person still feels like within this one sort of general sort of space, they can sort of have their own space to kind of do the exercise. But also, I think it just makes it a lot easier in terms of kind of thinking about things, that, you know, you start sort of from one end, so it's like a full circle in a way, and then you sort of come back, you know, sort of to that end, and then, you know, you're done. And it makes it, I think, one of the things, obviously, for our clients in time is of the high importance.
Absolutely.
So it's key thing to just make the space work for them. Otherwise, you know, I think one of the things that you would waste time going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So zoning is a very key thing. Again, sort of applying the same sort of principles that we apply when we create interiors.
Amazing. So back onto kind of like, obviously what you do best is the design. How important is lighting, ventilation, that kind of stuff, in the sense of like, how important is that in the design process? Is that kind of number one? Is that where does that kind of sit for you?
Oh, I think that's important in terms of, I think, the overall. So I think with a sort of great interior, it's all about layering everything. And, you know, I say, you know, a great interior is all about sort of a sensory experience as well. So lighting, again, is super key, very, very key. If we sort of go back to what was mentioned before about the whole sort of circadian rhythm, right? If someone was working out in the, like, you know, at the early hours of the morning, the lighting is different to someone who wants to work out in the evening.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is someone who's working out in the evening and there's, like, you know, sort of 7,000 sort of bright dentist lights, you know, sort of shining at them. I think that's very key. I think the other thing is very key is sort of smells. You know, it's a bit of a difference between, if you kind of think about going into the, I don't know, an average hotel, and you go into a hotel that's kind of thought about every single experience that you have from walking in. And so I think we apply that sort of same principle as to, you know, whether we have diffusers, for example, in space, and what those diffusers, what they sort of smell of. So we worked with a perfumery that actually works, that used to work sort of with Chanel. And we sort of came up with a smell for a particular sort of gym that we created bespoke just sort of for that client. Now, anyway, I think when you kind of think about the smells, you think of something that should be rejuvenating, but at the same time relaxing and not, you know, sort of super intent. So I think, yeah, the whole thing is all very sort of circular and all involved.
Perfect. So with that, how important is adaptability within your design process? So do you design with the thought process of, obviously someone might be starting their gym journey with their new home gym? Do you kind of design with the thought process of we can upgrade this within the next 5 years when they're further down their gym journey life?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, you know, as again, so I think as we age and when we're working out or when we sort of create an, you know, any kind of interior sort of space, we think of how the space is obviously going to evolve. And, you know, I think unlike sort of an interior space where, you know, you sort of create some patina and form, a gym space is very different to that. It's just, it is kind of what it is. But I think there has to be, in any space that's created, a level of sort of flexibility that comes with something. So, for example, someone can sort of start off, you know, I think one of the gyms we did before was a client who was 25 and they were just more into like running, and that was a thing. Now, I think just last year, we then sort of updated actually sort of that gym to now have more sort of free weights involved in the sort of kettlebells and things of that nature. So I think there has to be a flexibility within terms of, like, you know, how moving times. And I think you equally the same thing with where sort of technology changes. So the equipment that we had 15 years ago, very different sort of, I think, to the equipment that we have now. So I think during COVID, for example, everyone was obsessed with that, you know, trainer exercise bike things. And, you know, now people start to move slightly away sort of from that to some extent. So over the years, even though we sort of plan, I think this is why sort of the zoning is key, that should they wish to update, you know, the equipment, or should they wish to sort of make something else down the line, there is sort of room for that.
So you mentioned about the bikes and the trainer bikes kind of going out of trend. So what do you find style-wise is trending at the moment? Is it minimalist? Is it luxury spa-like? Is it kind of like tech-driven? What do you find is what people are after at the moment?
So I think at the moment, I think there's a sort of a trend towards creating a space where there's a sort of a spa-like sort of feeling in a
Hmm.
home. I think with our clients, I think they don't want to have something that's so different and far away from what the rest of their home is. So ultimately, it should be all sort of cohesive,
Yeah.
sort of with the entire space. I think there's a level. I think it's just like just sort of right balance about technology and actual sort of functionality of an equipment. So a lot of our clients tend to have sort of trainers, and
Hmm.
wherever they are, the trainers can kind of work with them. So usually we have a big screen and they can connect with the trainer. Some of them just don't want to have any sort of additional techie monitoring equipment as such. So they sort of just tend to have, functional sort of more
Yeah.
machines like the Stairmaster and all the rest of it, that they can kind of just use to sort of work in the space. But I think it's always a combination. I think there isn't any client that we worked with in sort of number of years, maybe a decade or so that, I've been doing this, that they just feel, oh no, I don't want to have a thing, because they often tend to sort of work out with someone, and whether that person's their sort of virtually trainer or
Hmm.
whether the trainer's there physically in front of them.
Amazing. So you mentioned obviously spa-like at the moment, and you mentioned smells and stuff earlier on. So how do you use materials, lighting and textures to kind of influence motivation and calmness within the space?
So I think so in terms of sort of motivating within the space, again, I think one of the things I would sort of think with smells, and we do often a lot of research into, every sort of aspect of it. So where you kind of one kind of thinks about sort of certain smells perhaps that you can kind of use in a space to counter, because, one of the things that in a space, you get often warm, the smells that how you receive sort of the smells initially in comparison to when you're working out and it's a really hot space, they're sort of two very different things. So I think
Hmm.
that has to work, that they're not, oh, I'm just so relaxed. They
Yeah,
should be relaxed, but at the same time be able to sort of pick up, some weight, or, whatever sort of
whatever
exercises.
it is they're looking to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Lighting is also very important, because I think that sort of plays a role into, what your exercise is, whether you enjoy it or not. And, bear in mind also, a lot of sort of gym space, just so that you can see your form, as well as, like, it makes the space look larger, is that if you have really bad lighting and, you're working out, whatever one's goal is, and, one does not look nice in front of the mirror, you might be sort of, this incentivized to want to kind of work out, particularly if you're at
Yeah,
the start of your gym journey, for
yeah,
example.
absolutely.
Music is also a sort of big factor in it. So most clients want to be able to sort of connect to their own music, to be able to listen to something, or as well as maybe perhaps they would sort of listen to their trainers sort of within the space. So I think it's about, one thing of just constantly trying to evolve the
Hmm.
space over time, because I think someone could be motivated for the sort of first 6 weeks, and then again, depending on kind of what your goal is, one might sort of feel that, oh, after sort of 6 weeks, oh, I don't sort of feel motivated or something, and you have to tweak, do a little sort of tweak of something
Absolutely.
to allow that. So the simple tweaks, for example, you can do is things like with smells, right?
Hmm.
And sort of a playlist of what we can create sort of within that space.
Amazing. So what kind of design features are clients quite consistently asking for in 2025?
Oh, I think one of the things in terms of just materiality of equipment, I think that seems like super, super important,
Hmm.
as well as lighting, so functional lighting. And, I remember before I started this, I used to think, oh, mirrors were just for, like, bodybuilders and sort of posing, etc., and things like that. But actually, it's important, I think, for clients, they want to be able to sort of see their form, and, whether they're getting ready for a holiday to, be in some kind of swimsuit,
Yeah.
to have a look and sort of send the pictures back to their stylist, or, or someone. So I think that overall is sort of very important, like sort of in the space. I think just sort of creating that. Oh, I forgot the rest of the question.
just about design features, no stress. So what is kind of trending in 2025? That was the crux of the question.
That was the question. Okay. So I think what is sort of trending in 2025, I think what a lot sort of I found is that I think just in terms of materiality, so I think the clients want it to be very sort of beautiful. I think now we live in an age of sort of social media, where we have sort of some clients who, they're not interested in social media and they don't post, but then with the other clients that they're on this sort of fitness journey and they're very sort of excited about it. So they like equipment to look beautiful, and it's not just sort of the standard that you would get in your your sort of average gym.
Yeah, for sure.
So that it's both sort of functional, both sort of beautiful, and equally as it looks great next to a Birkin or it looks great next to an Aston Martin, they want to sort of marry both of those things together.
For sure. Okay, so moving on to kind of like collaboration. When you're working with like a gym equipment brand, what does effective collaboration look like to you?
So effective collaboration for us, and I think we often sort of collaborate with a lot of artisans when we're working on our projects. So I think it's a sort of full understanding of actually the requirements of what is sort of needed. And we always believe that, they are somewhat an extension of us, sort of to understand, okay, the expertise sort of within that sort of the home gym equipment to provide something. So where they're saying, okay, the client is more focused on doing more sort of free weight exercises, and over the next sort of 5 years or so, this is kind of what the trajectory of this sort of the journey is, and what is the equipment that is the best of the best, like in the market, that will oversee sort of that period of time and even sort of beyond that, as opposed to something that looks great today, which we're also mindful of, that we don't want to do sort of anything with a sort of fleeting fashion in some. I think there also needs to be a level of sort of flexibility in terms of what is required. And I think also just sort of considering the fact that, it sort of being a home and not a commercial gym in some sense, is that the requirements are slightly more sort of tweaked. So whether it's, usually, for example, you have a weight rack, a free sort of weight rack. But in a home, you don't really want to have sort of the metal sort of rack where all the weights go.
Of course.
So is there a way that then we can then sort of create something, collaborate that, or is there a way that, we can have something that's like leather wrapped, just to, again, to have that. And I think then the other sort of key thing is that in some cases, the gym is often in the basement or on the ground floor. And the very rare cases is on the same floor, as the sort of the principal floor in some respect. So it's sort of considering, okay, how much weight is required for this. So because we will need to kind of plan somewhat for this at the very early stages of our construction, to just make sure that there's efficient space. If it's on the first floor, for example, and there's a bedroom or something underneath, that when the weight is sort of dropped, there's a sort of sound that's kind of traveling along. It doesn't sort of damage the floor, and sort of things of that nature.
Perfect. And so how early in the design process is fitness equipment specification? How early is that?
So I think it's almost in the sort of same period as when we would do our sort of furniture sort of specification at the same time. So ideally, because again, we're dealing with things they're quite sort of heavy, like, quite heavy equipment. So that is quite early on that we'll kind of consider that, because if it's, for example, a new construction or, full refurb, we'll need to consider okay, if someone's going to be in a treadmill in this room and you'd be jumping, I don't know, wherever, how many hours of the day. So to make sure that the floor is sort of structurally sound enough to be able to sort of absorb all of this. If we're going to have weights in some room or somewhere, we need to consider, okay, how actually is this equipment, whatever equipment that we're getting in, how is it going to get in? Because if we close off the doors and the walls, maybe we can't sort of get in anymore. So I think the conversations are a lot sort of earlier on. So one of the things that once we have the conversation with a client in terms of like, what are their requirements, we kind of get the ball rolling in terms of this. So so I'll say it's still within the very early stages.
Amazing. Okay, so final few questions. One of the kind of key ones, just to get your perspective on it, is where do you see home fitness design heading in the next 5 years?
I think home fitness design sort of within the next 5 years, I think more people want to sort of incorporate a sort of home gym, into their home. And primarily because I feel that in the way sort of the direction of things are going, one of the things is that some clients see things on sort of social media and they want to sort of experiment it with themselves. They tend to sort of work to really long hours. So again, the flexibility of just having a home gym, it's a incredible sort of convenience that's there. I think in terms of, I guess, sort of equipment wise and where that's going, I think it's allowing for customization. We are now sort of within the time of importance of sustainability and kind of thinking about the lifespan of an equipment, and not just the lifespan in terms of, okay, I have it for 10 years or whatever it is, but just, how does it sort of go back into our ecosystem in some way. I think in terms of machinery and equipment that we think about, it's sort of like sort of dual purpose, sort of multifunctional equipment as well. I think now we've moved into an era of all, I remember when the Apple Watch sort of first came out, a number of people were like all sort of concerned how it can affect the watch market. But now, we have like Oura rings and, so many sort of fitness watches. So I think it's like incorporating these like sort of technologies as well into equipment. I think this is going to be a very big thing.
That's a really clever approach, actually.
So, I think, I don't know, there's so many companies that exist and they can just more and more just basically keep popping up in terms of just going, oh, okay, you can open an app and I can kind of see what my, my blood sugar levels potentially are, all the rest of these things. So I think clients want to be able to do that. And because, people work with trainers or doctors, and the ways I think sort of things are shifting, it might probably just be, okay, well, we want to know what your health sort of stats are, or how much you can run, or, whatever your resting heart rate is, for example. And it's great to just okay, look, I can just open an app and I can have a look and I can update my record. I think it's going to be now less of the time of, where people could have, you get a little book and you write everything down. So I think, over the next sort of 5 years, I feel like there'll be more technology sort of involved in terms of monitoring our health, and as well as just the multifunctional equipment.
Amazing. Right. Final question. It's a bit of a fun one.
Okay.
If budget and space was no issue at all, what would your dream home gym look like?
Oh.
Well, this is the question that gets you really thinking, because it's about you now. It's about what you can have.
Oh, where do I start? So it's like with sort of with a designer, I always feel like I'm my own sort of worst client in a way, because I had so many options of everything. I think my sort of very first thing I think I would have would be a water rower.
Nice.
I love that's incredible sort of equipment. The next one, I think I would love to have a Stairmaster. I'm an avid fan of it, even though sometimes I'm like, what am I torturing myself for?
I'm like that. Every time I'm on the Stairmaster, I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Honestly?
Exactly.
But it's worth it in its weight in gold.
It really does work. It's like, you're there for sort of 5 minutes and you think, oh gosh, I've been here for 20 minutes. And then you look at the time and you're like, oh.
Okay. I'm only 4.5 minutes in.
Exactly. So I think the Stairmaster, I think the Kinesis would be a big one that I would love to so I think those would probably be, and and some really beautiful weighted jump ropes. I think those would be sort of my sort of top key equipment. I would love to have.
See, it's always interesting asking that question, because you get such different answers and such different approaches. It's fascinating. Well, Augustine, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit and talk with you. Tell everyone where they can find you. Let everyone know kind of what projects you've got going on at the moment, and we'll make sure to tag you in the descriptions.
Oh no, thank you very much. So you can find me, you can find the studio at studio on Instagram, so studio_Augustine, as well as on TikTok, or www.studio-augustine.com. I don't even know, do people still even say www?
I think we just assume it now, don't we?
It just comes up. So at the moment we're working on 3 hotels, so in the UK, in France, and in South Africa at the moment. A number of sort of residential project in the UK, as well as a restaurant, so 2 restaurants at the moment, an apartment in New York. And we are sort of coming out with something really exciting next year. So if you sort of stay tuned and
keep an eye out.
Keep an eye out, and you get to see.
Amazing. Well, I'm definitely going to keep an eye out. Hopefully I get to come and see you.
Of course, absolutely.
Amazing, brilliant. Thank you very much, Augustine. It's been a pleasure.
Jay. Thank you.